panelists for joining us today. We formed the league last summer in the county, and the intent behind that is for us to create an environment where we could talk about issues and not be caught up in partisan dialogue, so that we could have an honest discussion about how we can come to solutions for our community together. We received a small grant from the Women's Fund to put this event on, and I would personally like to thank John Lutz for giving us a ton of support and for helping us put this event together. So again, thank you for coming, thank our panelists, and then our moderator for today, Rita Kip. Do you want to introduce the panelists?
Sure.
Thanks.
I'm going to speak for back here so that I can get to
you know what? We ought to do the...
Oh, let's do the film.
Yeah,
Yes.
could you hit the lights, please? Yep. I'm going to do a short little film. I think probably most of you have heard on the news, there's a lot of discussion about women running for office, people that have gotten engaged in the political process that never have before. And I think this little snippet helps to set a stage as we talk about why we brought our women candidates and office holders in here to talk to you about the decision to run for office or hold an office.
Of the president's speech, his victory in 2016, we saw what is being called a turning point in American politics.
That's right, more women than ever before getting involved, voting, and running. And groups that help women run are reporting incredible growth in the past year. Nancy Chen reports.
First, they marched.
The new day is on the horizon.
Then they cheered. And now they're running for office in record numbers. A seismic shift in women claiming their voices and their power.
Just after the 2016 election, we saw, and over the course of the last year, we saw a 1,600% increase in the number of women coming into our programs.
Erin Los-Cutraro is the co-founder of She Should Run, a nonprofit, nonpartisan group focused on getting more women to run for office.
If we want to see the smartest policies in our country, we can't possibly get there if we're leaving half the talent pool out of the equation. And right now, women represent less than a third of all elected offices in this country.
Founded in 2011 and growing to a community of about 16,000 women, the DC-based organization has never seen interest like it has since Election Day 2016. They had expected Hillary Clinton to win.
But in fact, what happened, was I think it was a really eye-opening experience for women, and one that we saw women coming to the table and saying, okay, I feel like I have to do something. I feel like I have no other choice but to step up now.
She Should Run connects women with each other, as well as takes members behind the scenes of how to run through online lessons. It also pushes people to nominate the women in their lives.
I think that's part of what She Should Run is all about, that women still need to be asked. We need a bit of affirmation, we need a bit of invitation, and but that did plant a seed.
DC Attorney Malkazif says she had never even entertained the idea of public office until a friend of hers posted a link to She Should Run on her Facebook page.
There is something about just telling a woman, yes, you're good enough, yes, you know enough, and yes, you will figure out how to do that, and to have that, you're going to have that support network for when you do have questions.
Zeeb has since become chair of a commission for the city of Alexandria. She Should Run is noteworthy for supporting women across different parties and aiming for positions across all levels. Their goal to get 250,000 women to run for office by the year 2030. Cutraro says this moment is about something much bigger than the results of 2016.
The 2016 election cycle, people will often, ask She Should Run, is it just the results of the election that this is about? And our feeling is, we saw this happening. This has been, this sort of snowball effect forward has been building.
Now we can go anywhere. We learned to harmonize.
I think that's it. Yeah.
That's it?
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, that was inspiring. And the purpose of the panel today is inspiring you. Inspiring you to be engaged politically. Who can ways to be engaged politically. One way. Yeah.
School.
School. Well, you're preparing yourself to engage politically because you need to be informed about the world. What else? What's another way to be politically active? Yes? Voting. So basic and yet so powerful. Don't ever let anybody tell you that your vote doesn't count, because it does. That's your voice. What else? What else? What did we see on the film? We saw women marching. That's a form of engagement. Maybe you hear that the legislature down in Columbus is getting ready to talk about an issue that you care passionately about. You can phone them. You can send them a postcard. You can let them know how you feel. The most intensive way to engage politically or to be politically active is to hold a political office. And that's why we've arrayed these women here today. Because they're all either in a political office or they're campaigning to be in one. And these women are here thus as role models for us. We admire them because they're leaders. But make no mistake, they are also servants. We talk about political office as public service. So anybody who serves in a political office is both a leader and at the same time a servant of the public, getting done for their communities what needs to be done at the local level, at the state level, at the national level. And yes, there are rewards that go with being a servant leader. There's often a salary attached to these jobs. There's certainly gratification and satisfaction in the work. But there are also sacrifices, time that you give up, that you could have been with your family or doing other things. So I hold, people who stand for office, who run for office, and who serve, I hold them in very high esteem because they are doing our work, and we appreciate that. This morning, the panelists are going to speak about their experiences of running for and being in office, and we're going to follow a alphabetical order. Let me, in alphabetical order, tell you who they are. They're going to speak in reverse alphabetical order, but I'm going to say all of their names and their offices first, and then right before they speak, I'm going to remind you, because there's no signs up here telling people who you are. So, in alphabetical order, we have Grinberg down here in orange red. She is a trustee in Granville Township. We have Stephanie Dodd. And Stephanie is on the state school board. That's an elected office. She is a candidate for lieutenant governor. We have Michelle Lerner, who is in the village council of Granville. We have Melinda Miller, who is running for Ohio Senate in District 31. That's our district. And finally, we have Olivia Parkinson, who is currently Licking County Treasurer. Now, yeah.
I think we also have Elizabeth Brown with us.
I'm a former city council member. Oh, I didn't know you were coming. Sorry. And your name is?
Elizabeth Brown.
Elizabeth Brown.
I'm a Columbus City Council.
You're even sitting in the right chair, I think. Yes.
Well, technically, we be squished, but it's fine.
Well, welcome, Elizabeth. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I didn't know about that. So, what we posed to the panelists is a challenge to talk about these things, and we laid it out that they should talk about these things in 5 minutes. Some of them may decide to go through everything. Some might decide to concentrate on, one or two of these things. So what we posed were these questions. Why are you, or did you, decide to run for office? Do you believe that your gender impacted your campaign in any manner? Do you believe there are special considerations that females running for office should consider? What, if anything, about your gender enhances your ability to serve in elected office? Why is it important that young women vote? And finally, other than voting, how can young people best get involved in the political process. So those are the questions. You're going to each talk about 5 minutes, and then at the end, we're going to open it up for a more question and answer kind of interactive time with you. So we're going to start in reverse political order with Olivia Parkinson, who is the treasurer of Licking County. Olivia.
Guys, I want to start by thanking Rita and Pam for inviting us all here. I think this is a fantastic idea, and I was very excited to be asked. As Rita said, my name is Olivia Parkinson. I was born and raised here in Licking County. Graduated from Lakewood High School and then the Ohio State University after that. I have a daughter who is a freshman at Lakewood High School, so she's approximately your age. I'm not sure exactly what all grades we have here. I guess when I think back to what prompted me to run for office, I first ran for countywide office in 2013. But at that point, or at least pretty recently up to that point, I truly had not even considered it. It was not something that was in my mind as I was going through college. My degree is actually in psychology. And I spent the first 10 years out of college working in the private sector, mostly in accounting and finance and that type of area. When my daughter was getting ready to start kindergarten, I was working a lot of hours in a week and very much decided it was time for me to be on a more regular schedule. So I took a position with the county, working for our common police clerk, Gary Walters. I worked there from 2009 until 2015 when I received the appointment for Licking County Treasurer. I decided in 2013 to run for office, mostly at the encouragement of Gary, who was a mentor to me, as well as my family. But personally, for me, I guess it was an opportunity to further my career. I had decided at that point I really enjoyed the public service aspect of working for the county. Also, of course, would provide me with a better salary than what I had at the time. And most importantly for me at that point, it was going to give me more flexibility in my schedule for my young daughter. So those were the decisions behind my running. I was lucky in the sense that I had the ability to run safe. We talk about that basically, that my job that I had wasn't at risk whether I ran or not. So I knew that even if I was unsuccessful, I was going to continue my position as chief deputy at the time for the common police clerk's office. So that was definitely easier for me to take that risk. So that was my why. As far as my gender impacting my campaign, my most recent campaign, I was lucky enough to be unopposed, so not really. In 2013, my opponent also was a female, so I really don't feel like it did impact the outcome of the campaign at all. I will definitely say it played a part in general of how I presented myself. Lots of things to consider, especially as a young female. I found that I was constantly fighting this desire to have people take me seriously. So I naturally am a pretty laid-back, goofy person, but when you're out there attempting to get people to have confidence in you and vote for you, that was a challenge for me, especially at that age. I was about 32 at the time. So I guess that tied into special considerations for females running for office. In regards to how my gender enhances my ability, my current position, my primary duty is collecting real estate taxes for the county. So in essence, I'm a bill collector, which is not always a fun position to be in. There are other aspects of it. We do the investments and things like that that are better. But when people are struggling to pay their real estate taxes, it can be a tough situation. Sometimes they're going to have health problems or problems within their family. And I feel like you need to have a lot of empathy. Not that guys can't have empathy. I'm not trying to insinuate that. But I do feel like it makes me a little bit easier for them to talk to about their problems. I'm more sensitive to some of those things and really try to help them through it rather than being this mean person who just wants the money. In regards to why it's important that young women vote, I feel like that's the same reason it's important for anyone to vote. As Rita said, if you don't vote, you don't have a voice. So no matter what your group or your beliefs, voting is how you can definitely be heard. In regards to being active, volunteer is a huge one. There are plenty of candidates out there, I'm sure, who would love to have you volunteer. You can help them walk in parades, you can go door to door, you can
stuff mailers, any of that kind of stuff. And if there isn't a particular candidate that you're comfortable with, get involved with the issue, you know, local school levy, any of that stuff. So I think that sums it up for me. Thank you.
Next in line is Melinda Miller, and she is running for Ohio Senate District 31.
Hi everybody, I'm Melinda Miller and I'm running for State Senate in District 31. Thank you so much to Rita and Pam and the League of Women Voters for putting on this event. I'm really excited to be a part of encouraging you all to participate in our democracy, so thank you so much for being here. I never thought I would run for office. I don't think I even ran for student council. And frankly, it's pretty scary, but like a lot of people around the 2016 election, I've just felt compelled to get more politically involved. And on the base level, I'm running now because I feel like our democracy is in trouble and that having a choice in every race is critical to its health. I feel like we need to stand up and fight for our values in every election because right now our differences are really great and the consequences of our elections are dramatic. So we all have to step up in whatever way we can to help create the future that we want to see. And maybe I would have gotten involved in politics sooner if I'd had the confidence to believe that I could make a difference. But like a lot of girls and women, I have a pretty strong internal voice telling me that I'm not good enough, or I'm not smart enough, or I'm not strong enough. I think a lot about a story that Hillary Clinton tells. I think she's told it several times, and throughout her career she's been in the position of promoting people. And she tells the story that when she comes to a man to promote him, he will say, what took you so long? Yeah, of course, let's go. And when she comes to a woman to offer her a promotion, she will often get, are you sure? Am I ready? You think I'm good enough? So as women, we have these insecurities to overcome, and we have to be really brave. But we're natural leaders. We're good listeners, and we're empathetic. We see all sides of a problem, and then we can speak clearly about how we feel and think about those problems. We're collaborative, and as women, we are wired to put the well-being of others ahead of everything else. And those are really good qualities in a leader. So I think we need more of that. I think we need more women in public office, especially now. And on issues that directly affect women and children, we have a real stake in the game, and there is no one better to make sure that those issues are heard and addressed and taken care of. It's really important that we have more women serving in positions of leadership, both so those concerns are heard and also to model for all of you that you can do it too. So with regard to special considerations for women running in office, I definitely considered how running for office might impact me. I wanted to be a mom for as long as I could, primarily, and there are plenty of women who have thriving careers and are great moms, and plenty of women who choose not to be moms. But I think that this is a common consideration, and it definitely was for me, that women grapple with when they're deciding to take on something like this. Also, there's always sexism at play. I'm not sure how I would advise somebody to factor that into a decision of whether to run or not, except just to know that it's there and to maybe think about how you might respond to that. I have felt really supported by both men and women in this journey, but I think we need to be prepared to make sure that our voices are heard and we're heard in a conversation, even when we are overlooked or ignored, because that does happen. So somebody told me right after I decided to run, I was talking to somebody, really nice guy who I like and who's a supporter, but he said to me, you know, you're going to do fine in this election because you have a really handsome husband. So there's that, you know. I think it is so important for young women to vote so that your concerns are heard, your voices are heard, and your concerns are heard. If we want to create a world where girls and women thrive, we need to elect people who will prioritize the concerns of girls and women. And ultimately, we have to step up and push against all those barriers and become those leaders ourselves. I cannot get the image of Emma Gonzalez out of my head. How many of you have seen her video? She was one of the Parkland survivors, and she was one of the first people to speak after that horrible tragedy. And her just willingness to be vulnerable, her clarity through these tears of her standing up so strongly for what she believed in, was just incredibly powerful and inspiring, and the world could not help but listen to that. And so what I really want to say to you today is that you all have that power too. You can do anything. You are smart enough, you are strong enough, you are brave enough, and when you just are curious and learn more about who you are, and then find ways to put that out there in the world, we cannot help but listen to you. So please do that and keep doing it. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Michelle Lerner, who is on the Village Council in Granville.
Thanks to everybody for having me here today. It's my pleasure to talk about elections and how to serve your community. So first question is, why did I run for office? I've been on Village Council now since 2009, and this is my third term in office. And when I initially ran for office, I think had you asked my children why I was running for office, they would say, well, because mom is in charge at home, and mom is in charge at school, and mom wants to be in charge of everything. So that's not really true. But I do feel very strongly that we all owe a certain level of giving back to the communities that we live in. And this is the way that I was able to give back, and the way that I'm still able to give back. So it's been my pleasure to serve on Village Council. And so I know that you guys are probably all well aware of what specific types of offices do and the levels at which they do them. But Village Council is I think, one of those things that people don't really know about. So we do things like decide what roads are going to get paved when, and what roads are going to be snowplowed in what order, and when it's time to repair sidewalks, and who pays for repairing this part of the sidewalk, and things like that. So things that just help our lives on a very everyday basis. And it's not big and exciting, and I don't decide national issues, but they're all things that help to make our everyday lives better. And so running for office and holding political office doesn't need to be a massive, massive undertaking. There's, of course, tremendous value in that too, but it can be something that feels more comfortable. So, in terms of how did my gender impact my campaign, I would say in my small community that I don't feel that it did impact my campaign. And in terms of considerations for females running, I wish that I could say that it shouldn't matter that I'm female running for office, but I think that there are times when females do have to consider those things. And I certainly agree with all of the really great things you have to say about qualities that women bring to office. But I think that a consideration, I would like it to not be that way. I would like everybody to bring those qualities to office with them. But in real life, I guess, females have to be aware of risks that we have to be aware of all the time, whether or not we're running for office. And I think that we have to be prepared for how we're going to respond should you be presented with questions about why are you running for office as a woman, or how will you handle holding this office as a woman, or who's going to take care of your kids while you're doing this. So you have to be prepared with responses for those issues. And other questions, why should women vote? Women should vote for the same reason that everybody should vote, because if you want to be a part of moving forward with your community, then it is all of our responsibility to contribute in that way. And how can young people get involved? Vote, and contribute to campaigns, contribute to issues, get involved in your community in some way. And it doesn't have to be politics, it can be other things. There's lots of organizations and lots of ways to volunteer to make a difference in your community.
organizing today and for asking all of us to be a part of this. I'm very excited that there is a League of Women Voters chapter here in Licking County. I think that's very important. So my name is Stephanie Dodd, and I'm an elected member of Ohio's State Board of Education. I represent the 9th District, which covers all or a part of 13 counties in central and southeastern Ohio. I was born and raised in Zanesville, and my husband and I have lived here in Licking County down at Buckeye Lake for the past almost 13 years. I'm the mother of 3. I have a 4th grader, a 2nd grader, and a 4-year-old. The State Board of Education, one thing that I realized when I decided to start running for the state board is that most people don't know what the State Board of Education is or that we even exist. So there are 3 main things that we do on the state board. We hire and fire the state superintendent of public instruction who oversees the Ohio Department of Education. We also vote on hearing officer recommendations for school personnel licensures. And the other thing that we do is that we vote and make decisions on education policy for pre-K, and really it was pre-K through 12, but now it's really starting to extend into higher ed sometimes as well. So that's what I currently do. I was honored that 2 months ago, Senator Joe Schiavone, who is running for governor, asked me to join his campaign and to be his running mate and run as lieutenant governor. So I am currently not just an elected official, but I'm running for office as well. Honestly, I never ever had any interest, had never really considered running for office myself. I had been asked back in 2012 if I would run for an office, and I had declined that because it just simply wasn't something that I was interested in doing. But then I saw that the State Board of Education seat was up, and at the time my children were not of school age, but they were getting to become almost a kindergarten for my oldest, and I was starting to pay attention to education. And so I thought, well, maybe I could be a good advocate and a voice in education and for my children and for my neighbors' children and for those across the state. I've always been extremely active in my local community, but honestly, I thought that was the extent of what my role in the community would be. Never intended to run for office, but I was very active in advocating on issues that impacted women and children in central Ohio and here in Licking County. But with the support of my husband, he actually encouraged me to go ahead and run. I did decide to run. I first ran in 2012 for the state board. It's a 4-year term. I ran against 2 men. There are no primaries in a state board seat. And I know one of the questions is, how did being a woman impact that? One thing I've learned, there's no scientific research behind who wins state board of education races or local board of education races, but for some reason women seem to do fairly well. So I was running against 2 men, and I was very proud to walk away with almost 61% of the vote and winning all but one of the 13 counties that I represent against 2 other men. When I ran for re-election in 2016, like Olivia, I was able to run unopposed, and you'll hear many politicians tell you it is the best way to run, and I agree. But yeah, so like I said, running for lieutenant governor with Joe Schiavone, and I'm really honored by that. I'm honored and proud to be a part of a team that values education. It makes that a key component of the campaign and of the ticket. I think, like everyone else has said, why it's important for young women to vote. I think it's important for young men and women to vote. And I think the reason for that is that the decisions that will be made by elected officials today are those same decisions that will impact you a decade or 2 decades from now. So think of where you'll be 10 years from now. Will you be married? Will you be starting a family? Will you be in a career? Will you be pursuing, more education? All of the decisions of those who are elected and seated in office today will ultimately impact you in the future. And so I think that's why it's so important for you to make sure that you're voting, and not just voting, but making sure that you're understanding who you're voting for. So I'm honored to be here, glad to be a part of this. Thank you so much.
Bryn Bird, who was recently elected to the trustee
Thanks for having me. I decided to run for Granville Township trustee, which is a lot like village council, but in the township, so in a rural community, because my grandfather was a trustee. And my grandfather died when I was only 12 years old, and I still have people who come up to me, he was in Westerville, and ask me, are you Charlie Bird's grandchild? Did you know Charlie Bird? And to know that my grandfather put an impact in the lives of the people in his community almost 20 years ago, that they still remember him and come up and ask about him, was something that really inspired me to be a part of our community. Not on, I was born on Abraham Lincoln's birthday, so I grew up reading Abraham Lincoln's speeches. My parents gave me that when I was like 10. And I would read his speeches, and I remember thinking, like, I need to be Abraham Lincoln and live forever and be this person who is immortal. And realize I can do that the same at a local level in a smaller office where I am filling potholes and making sure people's roads are paved and that their trash is getting taken out. But it's something that impacts your life day to day. Sometimes the things that are happening at the national level feel so far away and don't feel like they're impacting you day to day. But boy, do you know when you're driving your brand new, new to you car down the street and you get that pothole and get a flat tire. And I'm a person that you can call straight on the phone and help you work through that issue. And so that's a big reason that I chose to run. I had people in the community who came up and asked me to run, and that's really important. And if you, as you're growing up, see somebody that you think, wow, they'd be really good in office, that's an important step, is saying you should run, especially to other women. I had 2 men and a woman who approached me and said, I think you really should run. And I had a baby at home, and I was pregnant with another baby, and really thought that was a silly idea. And actually, because Liz Brown did it, there was a picture of her voting with her brand new baby. That was a big reason that actually pushed me to say, no, I can do this too. I can be a young mother and run for office at the same time. I do think that gender impacted my campaign, even though I didn't think it would. I grew up, in our world where I kind of feel like as women we can kind of do, really do anything. I never felt like I had to think about what career could I go into or what career could I not have as a woman. My parents were incredibly supportive. There's 2 girls and 2 boys of us equally, so I never thought about my gender as really impacting my campaign. But when it did go to run, I ran against another woman, and I actually did beat the other woman. And I did hear in the community, when men go into that voting booth, we had some men say, we can't vote for 2 women because we can't have 2 women in charge of this community. And I was very surprised to kind of hear some of that. And I was, I had a couple people ask me, are you sure you want this with young children at home? But instead of kind of shying away from that, I truly embraced that. And I took my 2 young daughters to everything. They campaigned with me, they went to meetings. I was giving stump speeches as my daughter was coming up, tugging on me, excuse me, Mom, can I go have animal crackers? I made sure that they were always with me. We knocked on doors together. It slowed me down, but they came right along. And when I won, my daughter, I asked her, do you know Mommy got her new job? And she said, yes, your new job is to help our neighbors. And I can't imagine what her life is going to be like knowing that she sees that and she already understands what being engaged in the community means. I think that also being a woman has helped me in office. We just had a conversation that the firemen, because we're in charge of the fire department, the way that they flex their hours, so if they work 40 hours before Friday and they leave a couple hours early, there was concern that maybe they need to track that differently and they shouldn't be able to flex their hours in the evening that way. And I am one of 2 women who work for the entire township. So there's me and a secretary for the fiscal officer, and that's it. There are no other women in 35 positions. And so they were all sitting there saying, we need to make these men, these guys really need to flex it more. And I went out and talked to the firemen, and they were flexing it a lot of times so they could get to their son's basketball game, so they could help their wife, so she could, get to a meeting she needed to get to. And I was able to kind of be the woman in the meeting telling all the other men to back down. We need a better flex policy so these men, these husbands in the fire department have a better work-life balance, and they can be there to help their spouses, and they can be there for their children. And I really don't think that if another mom hadn't been there, that would have been done. I think my only other thing is, how can other people get involved? Is to vote with your dollar, to think about where you spend your money and how that also impacts. I'm a farmer, so the way that you, do everything in your day-to-day does affect people politically, where you're shopping and how you're choosing to do that. And also, I think that as we're going through this conversation and talking about women in office, this is a great idea, and it's a great time in our history, and women are running for office at record numbers. But I do feel that we're still having a lot of white women running for office. And as we continue to have this conversation, how do we continue to talk about having more women of color and having more women or men of color also running for office. And I think that's something that as young people, as you come through the system, can also highlight and continue to work towards, so we have equal representation, not just of gender, but of all diversity. Thanks.
I'll introduce myself. I'm sorry about the surprise here.
I'm sorry that I must have missed a signal. Thank you.
I guess the bar is extra high because I got to justify my existence here. My name is Elizabeth Brown, or Liz Brown. I'm a member of Columbus City Council. I'm different from these women in that I don't currently represent Licking County, but I actually grew up in Licking County. I was born in Columbus, and then my mom moved to Licking County, and I grew up here and graduated high school here. So it's great to be here with you. And you've gotten great advice and great insight from all these women. And I'm going to add a couple things and tell a little bit about my personal story. So the reason fundamentally that I ran for office is, first and foremost, I grew up believing in it, right? And believing that our government can be a force for good and can be on the side of people. So when Bryn talks about what the example she's setting for her daughters, that is so important. And I know that probably all these women set that same example for their children, that they are people in elected office who are there because they want to help other people. They want to make the system work for people. So fundamentally, I've always agreed with that. When I learned that politician was a dirty word, it didn't really compute to me. Some point in my adolescence, because that's not my version of government. I really do see it as a service. Between high school and college, I did a program called America. So the program I did is called City Year. And we do have a chapter in Columbus. I did my year of service in Philadelphia. City Year works in school classrooms, elementary, middle school, high school. I was in a middle school in Philly Public Schools. And to me, that was really where I found my love of public policy, because in classrooms, and not when you're on that side of the desk, I hate to break it to you, but when you're on the other side of the desk in classrooms, you really see where public policy intersects with people's lives. When I was on the other side of the desk, when I was the student, I didn't always see it because I was engaged in my own work, and I was engaged in my own sort of pursuits in school. But when I was able to, I was an assistant teacher essentially in several different classrooms in a middle school. And you see the way that it's not just the education policies that are set in the state capitol, that have to be enacted in schools, but it's also housing policy, it's also wage policies. There are a lot of policies that affect how kids can learn from the very beginning. And I came to appreciate that in a new way, and I thought to myself, I want to be engaged in this space. Didn't know at first that meant running for office. I did several things that I won't bore you with that sort of helped get my feet wet. And ultimately, when I started working for local government, is when I realized that I wanted to run. And I came to that realization on my own. I decided I wanted to run. And I want to emphasize that a little bit, because sometimes it is really important to ask a person to run. But too often we assume that that's always what women need. So someone in the video basically said women always need to be asked to run for office. And sometimes it's the case. I mean, absolutely. Sometimes men need to be asked too. But a lot of people like to repeat this statistic that a woman needs to be asked 10 times to run for office in order to do it, or something like that. And I just want to burst that stereotype, because I don't think that it's true. I know a lot of women who decided on their own to run. I know a lot of women who were asked to run. But if we tell ourselves that story that women have to be asked in order to run, then women who want to run on their own feel they need someone else's permission for their own ambition. And I think that that's really dangerous. So I really believe that women, like men, come to the conclusion of running for office in a lot of ways. And I will tell you, for me, I made that decision on my own. I actually applied for Columbus City Council, and I didn't get it. And I thought, that's a bummer. But my name was in the paper that I applied, and my boss knew, and my friends knew, and now I really owned this thing. And then there was an opening on the ballot. because that was a vacancy in office that I applied for. But then there was an opening on the ballot to run. An incumbent dropped off the ballot. So I had actually 24 hours to decide whether I was going to run. I was also about this pregnant at the time, 2.5 years ago. I was about 7 months pregnant, a little more than that now. And I didn't know how to navigate that decision. So just decided to plunge in with the support of my family and my spouse. And that's very nice of you to say, Bryn, about on election day, my daughter was 2 weeks old. So I had the baby in the middle of the campaign, basically. And it wasn't how I would plan it. But again, because I really wanted to do this, I fell in love with local government when I started working in that space because of all the reasons you've heard, that you're so close to connection with people, and you're so close to your service, and you're so accountable for delivering that service, that to me it felt really worth the risk to just try it and jump in. I'm going to say another quick word about sort of my gender impacting my campaign and my leadership style. So first of all, those who knew that I wanted to run, when then they found out I was pregnant with my first baby, I had several men say, well, that's a good thing you didn't get that appointment on Columbus City Council because you're having a baby now. And I always found that entertaining and usually didn't argue, but just kind of nodded and went about my business. So there's certainly people with a lot of opinions. And when I was running, my gender did impact my campaign because I was pregnant, which only women can be. So it was a very female way to run for office. I was memorable because I was the pregnant lady. So it impacted in great ways and in some challenging ways. You know, I had to navigate that experience. But in terms of my sort of special considerations for women and how gender impacts our role in leadership, those of you, and I don't want to only talk to the women, because I do think that men are really important allies in recognizing the benefit of women's leadership. So when women are in positions of leadership, it's not about trying to take up our space in men's style, right? It's not about just doing the female version of how women lead. And this was really driven home to me last week. I was doing a police ride-along with an officer in the Linden area of Columbus, so one of our toughest neighborhoods, one of the highest rates of homicide in Columbus. And we were doing a police ride-along, and the woman that I was riding with, I didn't ask her exact age. I would guess she's probably about 27, 28. You know, pretty and bubbly and just had all of the stereotypes that you don't assign to a police officer, right? Like maybe you think in your head a police officer is like all business or very gruff or maybe hard to approach, or maybe you think the opposite and they're approachable, but she didn't fit any of these stereotypes, and she wasn't trying to fit into anyone else's box. And we rode together for about 3 hours, and we were constantly on calls, and you know, the kind of calls that you get run the gamut. One was a mother who was reporting an assault on her daughter, and she had to listen to that story and take the report and then work with the detectives later to follow up on that. Another one was a man who had had a negative encounter at a gas station and was kind of raring to go, wanted to maybe hold someone accountable for that. And she was able to diffuse it in her own way. And I really appreciated the version of leadership that she brought to the table. So I tell that story, and I will stop there. But I tell that story as it's not about me, but maybe as an example of how in all kinds of professions, especially in public service, it's really important for women to bring their version of leadership, not to fit in someone else's box. So, thank you.
Okay, it's time to get you involved in this, and you have an opportunity to ask questions. You could ask a question, one of these specific women, ask them to elaborate something they mentioned, or you could think of a question, a sort of general question, and ask the whole group to address what about X. So let's take just a minute to think about what you want to ask. You know, I'm an ex-teacher. I can really wait. Think about what you want to ask, what you'd like to know more about, or have them respond to. Or any specific thing. I mean, I wrote some notes here, and we heard some interesting things this morning. Yes?
Hi, my name's Courtney Baxter. I am a resident of Granville, and I'm on the League of Women Voters. And as a young person, I know that it might be confusing to think about, you know, you're all in high school, and a lot of people here are talking about running for office, and that might feel kind of far away. So I'm wondering if you all could talk about things that, besides just registering to vote and voting, what we as young people can do to start our active citizenship, you know, as 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 28-year-olds.
You know, there are, sorry, go ahead. No, go for it. There are groups out there that are attempting to form for young people. You guys are a mysterious group for a lot of elected officials because you're hard to reach. It's constantly changing. Social media has become so incredibly important, and I feel like a large majority of the elected officials, I can be really honest, especially on the county level, are attempting to catch up to that and doing so at a very slow pace, which they're always going to be behind. But there are groups out there. I'm a member of a group called the Young Leaders of Licking County, for instance. It's for those 40 and younger. I got in while I still could. But you know, just be involved in any of those groups because topics will come up and your voice will be heard. And just be aware of what's going on in your community. There are events all the time on Facebook or whatever you're using now, Snapchat. People are advertising. Go to the events, check it out, see what they're talking about.
Somebody else want to respond to that?
I was just gonna say, I think when I was in high school and then moving forward, I did girls state in high school, which is where you do actually go through the American Legions and kind of learn about government, which was really exciting for me. I was in FFA to learn a little bit more about parliamentary procedure, which has actually carried me further than you would have thought, 4-H clubs and other things doing that. But I think one of the biggest things is just knowing that you also don't need like a linear path that way. What I went to school for, the interest that I had, I just continued and followed, even though I don't use some of those things in my everyday life. Still, my degree is in zoology. I don't use that. But it doesn't, you know, I followed my passion and some of those things. I think for a way to get involved politically too is if you really enjoy animals and volunteering in the Humane Society, just getting engaged in that level will help you understand how does the Humane Society get their funding. When they need their funding, you know, they sometimes have to call their county commissioners or their state legislators, and so I think some of those ways you can get engaged at a young age is just by following what you're passionate about, and it doesn't have to seem so big and boring with prop pools and snow removal. But for me, I was really, my family are produce farmers, so I really did get involved through 4-H and FFA, and I mean, I can't thank them enough, but I learned a lot just in those club meetings about how to pass a motion and do some of that, and I can't explain how much that has actually helped my entire life to know how to just do some of those just sitting through a meeting and filling out forms, and that was all through 4-H and some of those clubs that you guys are all still at an age where you can get engaged in.
What about questions from you?
In the interim, while we're waiting for someone else's question, can I throw something out there for the first one? Okay, thanks. I think truly the most important thing that you guys can do as people who are maybe going to vote for the first time in the next election, or getting ready to be of an age to vote, is to actually read and learn about the different issues that you can vote on. And make sure that you understand all the different sides and things, factors that go into any of these different issues. And think for yourself before you get there. And vote for what you truly believe, not for what you heard on the sidewalk or is just some kind of common knowledge or something like that. It's important to actually make sure you understand all of the different things that go into any given issue, whether it's a big thing on the national level or a small thing on the local level.
That reminds me of what this student said when I asked about political engagement. He said, go to school. And actually, you know, going to school prepares you to do what it takes to be a good voter. Because you can't walk into the voting booth and know who to vote for or how to vote on an issue unless you've done a little homework. Who are these candidates? What do they stand for? Do I agree with them or not? What is this issue? Do I support this or do I oppose this? So, you know, every time you walk in to vote, you need to have done your homework first. There is some learning and there's some little work that goes along with it. And by the way, don't let me get out of here without saying that if you are going to be 18 years old, at least 18 years old, by this November, early November, you can register to vote today. We brought voter registration cards back there. We have people who can support that process as you fill it out, and you can be ready to assume adult citizenship by registering to vote today.
And you can vote in the May primaries.
Right.
Yeah, you can vote in the May primaries. There, on the table over here, we have voter registration cards, pledge cards, and then a little card so that all of the panelists have talked about things you can do. A short little list just to remind you of the things that you can do. And if you're 16, you can join the League of Women Voters, and we would love to have your voice. Because that's another way to get politically active as well. Thanks.
Anything else we should address here?
Can I just see raise of hands how many of you are going to be 18 by November? Yay. Awesome.
How many of you are already registered to vote? No? Hey, you have an opportunity here. That guy in the back.
I would just add, you know, speak up. Make your voices are just as important as everybody else's. I brought up the story of Emma Gonzalez because, you know, you guys are the future leaders, and you can be leaders now, and you can speak up for what you believe in and how you feel about things right now, and we need to be listening to your voice too. So, you know.
Yeah,
go for it.
In Kansas, there are 6 high school students running for office.
Yeah.
They're not even old enough to vote, and they're running for governor.
We have the ability to make a difference.
Yes.
Going back to where how the election was with Trump and Hillary, like what would you ladies say about how would you guys feel about that? Going back throughout what Hillary said, what Trump said, which would you say was right about?
Well, one thing is the League of Women Voters is nonpartisan, so we can't really endorse a candidate or a party. But I can say, I think a lot of people, both Republicans and Democrats, were very surprised that Trump was elected. I think a lot of people voted on that day who had never voted before, and conversely, a lot of people didn't vote who should have and could have. And then they woke up the next morning, and if they regretted the way it turned out, they thought, what was I thinking? I didn't even go to the polls. If everybody who could have gone to the polls actually went and voted, it would have been a different outcome.
And I'll add that the 2016 election sort of put into high relief some of these gender dynamics in campaigns, right? So that was something that people were observing on a very high level. And I do think that gender played a role in that campaign. I don't think you can assign Hillary's loss or Trump's win to any one exact thing. I think there were a few really powerful dynamics that made the difference. But in general, when women run for office, they win at the same rates that men do. So that's not a lesson we took from 2016 because it felt, you know, everyone assumed the woman was going to win and then she didn't, so that just might possibly mean that women have a harder time running. That is not the case. Women run less often. and that's why, you know, we represent about less than a third of all elected offices. But so I have a lot of things I can say about 2016. I, for one, was very unhappy with the results, and I think Trump wore his sexism on his sleeve, which was very negative for women, and also set a bad precedent and role model for men to aspire to. And I know that there could be people who support Trump in this room, and I just have to be honest, or I'm not myself. So that's what I think about that. But I also just encourage you, as you're coming into your own civic participation, sort of civic lives, to look for lessons about how democracy works and about who our elected leaders are that are out of the spotlight sometimes. The national elections play out in such a massive way that it can take up all your attention and feel like the only thing that's out there. But look for these lessons in who our leaders are and who's running for office. Look for those closer to home and on other levels of government, because there's really good stuff happening there. And it would be easy to be disillusioned if we only paid attention to them.
I think with the outcome of 2016, I think that it was quite telling, especially in Ohio, that there were a lot of people who did show up and vote who maybe hadn't voted in the past, who maybe felt that they weren't being represented, and so they did come out and vote. And there are a lot of people who are still, you know, here in Licking County and many other counties across the state who are very happy with the results of 2016. And then there are many people who are not, and so I think that we have an interesting dynamic here in 2018 where I think there are a lot of people in Licking County and across the state who are saying, well, what is it that we do want in elected officials? I think for a long time, you know, you saw the same people running over and over and over again for office. And here we are in 2018, and we not only have an increased number of women who are running for office, but we have an increased number of young people who are running for office. And we have an increased number of people who are maybe new to elected office, stepping up and saying, we can bring something of value to the table. We have something that can, you know, we're willing to work with you, and we're not the status quo. And I think that's something that's really important. And I think that's a positive that comes out of 2016. And I think that you all will play an important role, not just in 2018, but, you know, in the next decade and longer, in making sure that your voices are heard.
I would just say, you guys are at a great age too. I grew up in Licking County. I grew up, and I remember at 18, taking the time to not just listen to what my peers were saying, not listening to what my parents had told me, but for the really first time, being able to take that time and sit down and read, think about how the world had felt to me and some of the injustices that I felt, or some of the things that I really appreciated about candidates, and being able to find my own voice. And I think that's hard sometimes in our tight, smaller community to find your own way and to strike out differently than where your parents were or where you were, but being able to take that and really like educating yourself. And I think the League of Women Voters is an incredible resource, because they are here, and the history of the League of Women Voters, which is just amazing, just to give you that space where it's not one side versus the other, it's nonpartisan, meaning they want you to hear all sides, and then you can make your own decision, because you're at a great opportunity just to find yourself, and maybe you'll disagree with your parents, and that'll make for even better dinner conversations.
Well, I smell pizza. I want to thank all of the panelists who I have found to be very inspiring and interesting this morning, and I want to thank you because you were an attentive audience. I hope you found it interesting and useful, and I hope that along with grabbing a piece of pizza, you will grab a voter registration form and the other materials back here on the back table. So thank you very much.